Konnichiwa, friends. Today on the podcast, we're introducing you to racing in the Far East. Stay tuned. Hop in, buckle up, and get ready to lay it on the line. This is Not Speeding, Just Qualifying, a podcast that's just as fast as it sounds. Hello, everybody. Welcome to an all-new episode of the Not Speeding, Just Qualifying podcast. I am your host, David Lawrence. Thank you so much for putting me in your ears today. Before we get started, as you know, we always love to tell you guys to subscribe to our channel. We are on YouTube. We are on the YouTube Music app. Go to the podcast section of the app and look up Not Speeding, Just Qualifying. We are right there for your listening pleasure. Thank you guys so much in advance. Guys, I'm really excited about these next two episodes. Today, I'm going to introduce you guys to racing in the land of the rising sun. Japan has been long known for its car culture, and the nation itself is kind of a cult figure in the automotive world. And let's face it, how many of us listening are owners of a Nissan, Toyota, or like myself, a Honda? Well, over these next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the nation's fever for motorsports, particularly its domestic championships. And spoiler alert, these next two episodes are going to be a little bit longer than they normally are. To help me further unpack the Japanese motorsports scene, I sat down with British-born, Japanese-based journalist and commentator Jamie Klein as the racing season in Japan kicks into high gear. Our focus today will be the top sports car racing championship in Japan, the Autobax Super GT Championship. I present to you part one of my two-part interview with Jamie Klein as we preview the 2025 Super GT season. All right, everybody. As you guys know on this podcast, I love to talk motorsports and all type of motorsports, but I also want to introduce some motorsports to you guys. I have been following Japanese motorsports for about 20 years now, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit more insight and information on Japanese motorsports, and I think I found just the guy to do it. He is the Asian motorsports reporter for outlets such as Sportscar 365 and motorsport.com, and he currently serves as commentator for the English feed of the Super Formula Championship. He's based out of Tokyo. Welcome to the Not Speeding, Just Qualifying podcast, Jamie Klein. Jamie, pleasure to meet you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, great to be on the show. Thanks for having me. Doing very well. It's as I'm sure you're aware, it's a pretty busy time in the Japanese motorsport calendar with testing for Super GT in full swing. And actually, the Super Formula season's already begun. We had the first round at Suzuka a few weeks ago. So, it's definitely one of the busier times during the calendar. But it's been really interesting so far. And I'm really looking forward to discussing both categories with you today.
Thank you for the time. Jamie, real quick, how long have you been living in Japan now, covering all these championships?
So I moved to Japan from the UK, where I'm from originally, in 2019. So this will be my sixth season of covering the two championships full time. I had my first experience of Super Formula and Super GT actually at the end of 2018. I just did a trip to Japan and covered both of the season finales. So Super Formula was at Suzuka. Saw Naoki Yamamoto win his his second championship. Third one didn't come until later. And then a couple of weeks later at Motegi, I was there to witness again Yamamoto together with Jenson Button win the championship. So that was my intro really. Kind of did the same thing in 2019 after I moved, and then of course we had COVID in 2020, so that was a slightly unusual one.
I know that was a challenge.
But from 21 onwards, it's been back to normality, and yeah, it's been great fun, sort of getting more and more integrated in the two paddocks.
Awesome. So, real quick, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. As you mentioned, it's kicking into full swing. We're going to kick it off. Super GT starts their 2025 season at Okayama. Quick little history. Super GT traces back to 1994 when it was formed as the All Japan Grand Touring Car Championship. It was morphed into Super GT in 2005 and is one of the top sports car championships in Japan. Jamie, we have the 2025 schedule. All five major Japanese motor racing circuits, Okayama, Fuji, Suzuka, Autopolis, Sportsland Sugo are on the calendar. Forgive me, I almost forgot Mobility Land Resort Motegi, so 6. However, for the first time since the pre-COVID era, the series is going international. They're going back to Sepang, a track that is no stranger to the championship. How big is it for the series to be going back international, and what's the collective in the paddock about going back to Malaysia this year?
Yeah, I think there's a great deal of excitement in the paddock. I think it's something that's seen as maybe even slightly overdue. Of course, the pandemic and all the challenges of travel, it's understandable that the trips overseas had to stop during that period. But even last year, that they were able to go testing in Malaysia again for the first time. The GT500 cars, that was a traditional thing that teams did around December and January. So that was kind of seen as the precursor to getting the race back on the calendar. Of course, actually, the race at Sepang was last held back in 2013, and they went to Thailand after that.
Right.
Kind of replaced Sepang. And then the plan was in 2020, before the pandemic struck, was to go to both circuits. Mm-hmm. So that was originally going to be planned as a night race, and this again will be I think it will be a sort of late afternoon. The exact schedule is still unknown, but I think the plan is for it to be a kind of a twilight race, not necessarily a full night race. But from all the people I've spoken to, I think the teams and the drivers are just relishing a new challenge, because we go to the same circuits every year. I guess after a certain amount of time, you kind of come to know what to expect, which teams are strong at which circuits or which cars are strong. So I think to go to Sepang will just be something completely different. All the teams are going to have to adapt very quickly. Of course, some teams have been testing there, but then again, that's in January. The race is in June. There's a lot of teams that haven't tested there, and a lot of drivers that will be racing for the first time in Super GT machinery. So I think there's a lot of there's a good buzz about the event, and hopefully it will be the start of Super GT becoming a more international focused series, which I think is what many people that I've spoken to at least would like to see happen.
It's kind of like going back to where the Super GT ethos came from almost 20 years ago, actually right on 20 years ago, because they had Malaysia. I think they were trying to go to China at the time, and they didn't, and things in China didn't quite pan out. But it's kind of nice to see this championship try to go back to the ethos of going back international again. You mentioned the challenges that come with Malaysia. I want to go back to 2024. You mentioned last season, a new challenge came in, timed races. There were 3-hour races last season. You mentioned the schedule's not fully fleshed out yet, but time races look like they are expected to come back in 2025. From what you saw last year, how did the time races change the complexity of the races? Like, what was the mindset when you've gone from a set distance, which the series has always been a part of, and then you now add a timed aspect of, okay, now we're racing against the clock?
Yeah, it was an interesting curveball on the strategy. It seems we'll have 3-hour races again for Fuji Round 2 and Autopolis. Still, like you say, yet to be officialized, but that is the plan as far as I understand. And I think the new format went down pretty well last year. I think it introduced a slight element of unpredictability, just because you don't quite know how the laps and the time will interact, because it depends on the safety cars or full course yellows or quite a few different factors. They of course have to be careful not to exceed the rule that one driver can't do more than 2/3 of the race. It's 2 drivers per car. So that's the rule they use. Of course, if you have a set number of laps, you can kind of plan out exactly which lap you're going to pit. But also with the 3-hour race, it becomes a 2 pit stop race. And I think that creates a much wider window. You can see teams taking more kind of risks on the strategy, and a much wider range of options are suddenly open to you, compared to the sort of the standard format where it's usually 300 kilometers, a single pit stop. So I found it really interesting last year. I think it was a good move by Super GT to shake things up as well, just for the same reasons about why Sepang seems to have been such a positively received, just to do things a little bit differently and provide something new for the fans. So I think some were concerned that it might be overly confusing, but I think most sports car racing operates on timed races. So I think for fans that are used to other forms of racing, I don't think it was any issue. And I think this will be the second year of it, and I think Japanese fans will soon get the hang of it if they haven't already. And definitely the races became more entertaining, at least in my opinion.
Sounds awesome. Want to talk real quick about the racing itself, or at least the classes. Super GT has 2 classes. I'll start with the lower class first, GT 300, which basically has your GT3 machinery and some specialized cars from the Japan Automobile Federation, the governing body that basically runs the championship. From what you've seen so far, what's one story to look out for in GT300 in 2025, Jamie, that you're looking at?
Oh wow, there's quite a few different options there. I think, like you say, that I think what makes the category truly unique is the way these 2 kind of subclasses of car interact with each other. And I think the JAF machines, as they're often called, the cars that are unique to Super GT, they really capture the imagination of fans, because they're like little baby prototypes. They're a lot smaller and nimbler, let's say, than the FI GT3 cars, and they produce really good racing. Of course, balance of performance is a 3-word phrase that will be very familiar to anyone that watches.
Absolutely.
IMSA, and it does apply in GT300 simply to keep the 2 subclasses as balanced as possible, and it's always a point of contention. But if we're looking at sort of specific storylines this year, I'm a big fan of the Lexus LC500, which is built by APR. Made its debut 2 years ago. Hasn't quite fulfilled the potential that APR believes it has in terms of its kind of aerodynamic superiority over the opposition. But new driver lineup for that car in the hands of APR this year, with Miki Koyama, who's a Toyota-backed female driver who a lot of people rate highly, has joined the team. And so has Oliver Rasmussen, who's an ex-WEC driver, although unfortunately he did injure himself in the opening round of the Super Formula Series, so it looks like he probably won't be ready to go at the start of the season. And there's also a second example of that car on the grid this year. LM Corsa have switched from the old GR Supra that they were using to a non-hybrid version. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the hybrid version of APR and the non-hybrid version stack up against each other. Different tyre manufacturers as well. Tyre war is an intrinsic part of Super GT. I think one of the only championships, really. worldwide. I think really just this and the Nürburgring 24 are just about the only places with open tyre competition still left at this level. I could speak for another half an hour just about GT300 alone, but but that's something that sprung to mind immediately.
Awesome. And definitely with the LT500 hybrid, I recently watched a little piece on the Prius. So I know that APR, they've had quite a heritage with getting these Toyota basically base chassis, building them up and then making them into these hybrid contenders. Real quick, I want to jump ship to the top class GT500. This is basically Japan's big three playground: Nissan, Toyota, and Honda. Each one has about 4, 5, or 6 cars on the grid, and basically these are the fastest cars: 2-liter inline fours, 650 horsepower, and basically battling it out for supremacy. And oh, by the way, both GT500, GT300 racing at the same time. Based on what you've seen from the Sepang tests, and and as we stated in our combo before we recorded, just the Okayama test just finished up earlier this week. Who do you see having the advantage out of the big three as we get ready to go into Okayama?
Yeah, I think for me it still has to be Toyota is the manufacturer to beat. Of course, they won the championship last year with Shota Boy and Kenta Yamashita driving the number 36 GR Supra for Toms, which is the kind of the flagship Toyota team. They carry the number 1 this year after their success last year. And to be honest, I haven't really seen much in testing to suggest that anyone's in a particularly good position to dethrone them at the moment. It's worth remembering that this is the second year of an aero freeze. So the cars were updated last year. Of course, we had the Honda Civic Type R and the Nissan Z was also updated to the Z Nismo spec. So there were some changes last year. This year, it's all the same as the previous year. So the focus very much on engine development, tyre development, although Bridgestone does supply the majority of the field in GT500. And kind of fine tuning the setup. I do think that Honda will be somewhat stronger this year because the Civic was such a huge change from the NSX that right. went before it, and clearly they needed a bit of time to get their heads around the very different philosophy of how to set up that car compared to how you would set up an NSX. But I still think the gap to bridge to Toyota and especially to Tom's is quite steep. Okayama has always been a favourable circuit for Toyota, so I expect Tom's to figure pretty strongly there. I'm also excited to see how Team Saad gets on. Sasha Fenestraz returns to Japan this year after 2 years away in Formula E, and so he joins Yuki Sekiguchi at Saad. That team had a good run at Okayama last year. They were second in the opening round. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Fenestraz can provide some kind of challenge to Tom's in the opening round. But yeah, for the full season, I think it is difficult to look beyond Toyota, but I'm hoping that Honda can at least give them a stronger challenge.
That was part 1 of my 2-part interview with motorsports journalist Jamie Klein, previewing the 2025 Super GT season. Unfortunately, in the interview, due to time constraints, I wasn't able to really get in depth with topics such as drivers and teams that are aligned with each individual manufacturer in GT500, for example. If you guys want me to touch up on that a little bit more, I'm more than welcome to do another episode that kind of goes into that topic a little bit more in detail. But today was really just to kind of get you guys an idea of the championship, trying to break it down for you guys, but also talk about a few things that really are really big talking points as far as the championship is from their perspective. Tune in next week for part 2 of my interview with Jamie. We talk about the open wheel championship in Japan that is all the rage, Super Formula. Before we go today, let's lay down some rubber and let's give you a preview of the weekend racing action ahead. As mentioned, Super GT kicks off their 2025 season this weekend at Okayama International Circuit. Supercars makes their annual trip to New Zealand with their visit to Taupo Motorsports Park. In the Middle East, Formula One heads from Japan to Bahrain for the Bahrain Grand Prix, joined by Formula 2 and Formula 3, while MotoGP is in Qatar for the Qatar Grand Prix. In Europe, World Superbike is in Holland. The GT World Challenge Europe kicks off their season at Paul Ricard. The NASCAR Euro Series kicks off their season at Valencia. Stateside on two wheels, AMA Supercross has made its way to Philadelphia, while Formula E makes their one and only U.S. stop at Homestead Miami Speedway for the Miami E-Prix. IMSA and IndyCar are ripping through the streets of Long Beach for the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. The NHRA Mission Foods Drag Racing Series is going 4 wide in Las Vegas with the 4 wide Vegas Nationals. And last but most certainly not least, NASCAR heads to Thunder Valley for a triple header weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. All right, everybody. Catch your breath. I know that was a lot. Safe to say, if you love motorsports, this is going to be a great weekend to just sit back, relax, and tune in. Speaking of tuning in, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jamie Klein. As you heard in my interview, he is part of the commentary team for Super Formula. He is also part of the English commentary team for Super GT, which is streamed on motorsport.com outside of Japan. If you do want to watch Super GT this season, you will go to motorsport.com. It is behind a paywall. A subscription is required, but for the racing you get for this championship, I definitely think is well worth it. Well, guys, that concludes this episode of the Not Speeding, Just Qualifying podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Before you go, just a reminder to follow us on our social media channels, X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. NSJQ Podcast is the handle at each and every one of them. Also, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and YouTube Music. Like and share our content so that way the algorithms can start getting us, and hopefully they start sharing us to people who don't know about us or those motorsport lovers who just haven't found us yet. Last but not least, if you want to follow me on my personal social media channels, the links to those will be in the description box to this episode. Join us back here next week for an all-new episode of the Not Speeding, Just Qualifying podcast. Until then, I'm David Lawrence. Always remember, you're not living life to the fullest until you're going flat out. So long, everyone.